If this message has reached you at this moment, it was never by chance. There are certain moments in our lives when the soul perceives truth long before the rational mind can comprehend or process what's happening. This persistent sensation, this nagging feeling that refuses to be silenced and lingers beneath conscious awareness, carries purpose and profound meaning. Life attempts to communicate something directly connected to this narrative, to this unique bond and the decision that can no longer be postponed. This isn't meant as a threat, nor is it an attempt to provoke fear through these words. What we're addressing is a truth that asks to be acknowledged right now, before silence inflicts deeper wounds than any poorly chosen words ever could. The confusion has been intensely felt. There are days when everything seems to cool down without any apparent reason, when physical and emotional distance grows disproportionately. Then come the moments when signs appear, sudden memories or small gestures that reignite the flame that has never truly been extinguished. This emotional instability isn't coincidental, and it's not a product of imagination. It represents a precise reflection of an internal conflict that doesn't belong to the one receiving this message, but comes from the other side of this connection. There's a fierce battle between pride and emotion, between vulnerability and fear, between the need to remain and the courage to confront one's own truth, between releasing the connection or letting it go. The universe and energy observe what escapes the naked eye. These moments of deep longing are noticed when no one else is present. Hidden fear is detected in the words practiced before mirrors but never sent. In decisions delayed due to lack of courage, because accepting genuine commitment inevitably means profound transformation, and transformation always frightens us. It frightens because loving with authenticity means surrendering control, dismantling defense mechanisms built over years, and stepping onto an unknown path where pretending indifference is no longer possible. Perhaps questions have arisen about whether the situation has been idealized. Are expectations too high for someone who appears stuck? Or is this connection genuine, or merely an illusion born from societal hopes? This doubt cuts deeply because it exhausts the heart. Wearing it down from feeling like it's giving more, from feeling more intensely, and waiting with seemingly infinite patience. But this relief needs to be received in peace. When a connection springs from deep and authentic roots, it doesn't age with time or distance. On the contrary, it transforms, gets tested, stretches to the limits of resistance, but doesn't disappear. When someone tries to escape what's real, life itself ensures that this escape is confronted. There's something breaking inside this person who has distanced themselves. It's not a negative breaking, but a necessary shattering of masks. Because there comes a moment when pretending that this bond isn't important becomes an impossible task. The weight of emptiness left by absence is far heavier than the fear of commitment, and right there, unexpected actions begin to emerge. Not because everything has magically resolved itself, but because the soul can no longer bear continuing to conceal what screams in silence. This message doesn't come to encourage forcing situations. Life doesn't require chasing, demanding, or emotional exhaustion trying to convince someone. On the contrary, what's needed is observation and trust, and above all, not betraying one's own intuition out of fear of loss. Because if you choose from inner truth, destiny responds with clarity. But if you choose from fear and uncertainty, everything begins to stagnate. Right now, there are two visible paths. On one hand, you continue doubting what you feel, downplaying the signs, and trying to convince your heart that perhaps it's better to let go before experiencing more damage. This path appears safe and logical, but slowly distances itself from what was meant to grow and mature. On the other path, you choose to remain firm without begging for attention, without forcing encounters, but without closing your heart to the possibility of simply remaining in a worthy and believing place, and allowing the other party to go through their own process. The consequence of acting based on this certainty is clarity. The consequence of this inaction is returning to painful cycles. The same stories, the same feeling of emptiness, and the same unanswered questions. Life repeats lessons not as punishment but as a teaching method, because it knows that inside there's tremendous capacity to love, but also a tendency to endure too much when you shouldn't. If this message resonates with you, write the word understanding in the comments. This is relief that needs to be heard today. There's no loneliness in this process. You're not imagining everything that's happening. There are subtle movements that have already begun. Internal decisions that don't yet show on the material level, but can be felt on the energy level. Destiny isn't in a hurry, but it doesn't stop either. And when the right moment arrives, everything falls into place in a way the rational mind cannot control. This person feels the absence, even when others are physically present. They feel the immediate risk of losing the connection, even when security is pretense. Because souls connected to something greater are not interchangeable. They recognize each other, and when someone tries to flee, life shows them the same name, the same memory, and the same feeling again and again. It's crucial to pay attention to how your body and emotions feel. Not from fear wanting results now, but in peace knowing that what's coming isn't born from a momentary impulse, but from truth that has already matured in silence. And when this phase of uncertainty passes, you'll understand why nothing happened earlier, why it was necessary to walk this solitary path, and why this waiting was allowed before action. But to understand why this person flees something they want so badly, one must first understand the battle being fought in their shadow. Something that psychology has tried to explain for a century, and which reveals the real reason for their unstable behavior. To truly understand why distancing happens precisely when the connection seems deepest, it's necessary to turn to a vision that transcends superficiality. Carl Jung, one of the pioneers in studying the human mind, spoke of concepts that explain with surgical precision what happens in the mind and heart of those who choose to create distance. It's not about lack of love or interest, it's about a far more complex psychological and spiritual phenomenon called the mirror effect and encountering the shadow. Understanding this is the key to stop taking rejection personally and start seeing it as a symptom of an awakening process. When two people share such a great bond, the connection functions like a flawless mirror. The mirror doesn't judge, it simply reflects everything placed before it with complete clarity. In this bond, the other person sees not only light, love, and understanding, but also their own deficiencies reflected, their unresolved fears and old wounds that haven't yet healed. Jung explained that everything not confronted internally gets destiny to appear externally. That's why someone offering unconditional love and complete acceptance can be frightening to those who haven't yet learned to love and accept themselves. When the vibration shifts from neediness to independence, the message sent to the universe and the other person is one of worthiness and high value. And in the universe, there's nothing more magnetic than a being who feels complete without needing to beg for love to feel worthy. At this stage, the other person begins experiencing what could be called symptoms of energy withdrawal. They may try to provoke small reactions to check if they're still in control by sending confusing signals or showing fleeting appearances. These aren't yet genuine attempts to return. There's safety checks to see if the rope is still in place. If you stand firm and don't react impulsively to these crumbs, the impact on their psyche doubles. Confirmation that something has deeply changed in the dynamic creates new urgency. That safe ground they walked has vanished, and now they must learn to support themselves or find a way to repair the bridge they helped burn. The energetic feeling of emptiness functions as an amplifier of truth. Without the noise of pursuit and drama, pure emotion remains. If the bond is real, silence doesn't kill it. On the contrary, it makes it ring with deafening clarity. Physical distance ceases being relief and becomes quiet torture. The other party begins feeling visceral need to restore this connection, not because they're forced to, but because their own soul begins craving this energy they previously rejected. They realize that the freedom they thought they were seeking feels empty without the person who gave meaning to that freedom. It's a delicate and powerful moment. The scale is balanced. There's no longer a pursuer or pursued. There are only two beings confronting their own truths in silence. And when this attitude of external inaction but great internal movement is maintained, the ground is prepared for the next phase. Because if silence becomes unbearable and the ego no longer gets its usual nourishment, the person tries to fill this void. They try to distract themselves, seek noise from outside to muffle the internal noise. But as we'll see next, they realize very soon that when connection comes from the soul, there are no substitutes that can deceive the heart for long. The moment pursuit ceases, a quiet but destructive phase begins for the one who decided to leave. A phase where distractions stop working. When the energetic feeling of emptiness settles, the distanced person's initial reaction isn't usually immediate surrender, but a desperate attempt to avoid. The human mind, when confronting an unpleasant truth or painful absence, instinctively seeks anesthesia. At this stage, it's very common for the other person to try filling the void created with noise, busy activity, or the presence of other people. It's the ego's last resource to prove to itself that it's in control, that it can survive without this deep bond, and that the decision to leave was correct. They immerse themselves in work, intensify their social life, or seek superficial distractions that give them the opportunity to not think, not feel, and above all, not remember. However, it's precisely here that an inevitable phenomenon occurs if the connection is genuine. When they try to seek elsewhere what was found only in this particular bond, they crash into an invisible wall. Life allows them to search, it allows them to explore alternatives, and it allows them to try connecting with new energies. But it doesn't do this to punish anyone, but to show the profound difference between the superficial and the soul. Every replacement attempt becomes a painful reminder of what's been lost. This person may be dating, meeting new people, starting conversations with romantic intentions, or simply seeking external validation, but they discover something that disturbs them deeply. Conversations feel empty without rhythm and depth. The chemistry that flows naturally in a soul connection cannot be artificially created with someone else. This person finds themselves sitting across from someone else, perhaps someone who meets all logical requirements to be a good partner, and yet they feel unbearable existential boredom. They notice they're forced to force laughter, that they have to over-explain their thoughts, that this telepathic comfort doesn't exist where glances would suffice to understand each other. What they sought as a pleasant distraction paradoxically becomes quiet torture. Comparison becomes inevitable and cruel for substitutes. Each deficiency in new encounters highlights the virtues of the attachment left behind. The superficiality of others makes them try to forget the depth of connection that shines. At this stage, the excuses given to themselves to justify the escape begin sounding hollow. They told themselves they needed space, that they needed freedom, that maybe there was someone better or simpler, but reality shows them that simplicity is sometimes synonymous with emptiness and that freedom is useless if it feels desolate. The attempt to convince themselves that time erases everything fails miserably. Far from erasing the memory, distance and failed comparisons polish it, making it sharper and more desirable. They realize that the loss of this bond wouldn't be an ordinary loss, but a deep wound that doesn't heal with distractions or new fleeting stories. When external distractions fail, silence returns with multiplied force. Then begins what in spiritual traditions is called the dark night of the soul, but adapted to the psychology of resistance. It's a period of internal crisis when defenses collapse. This person begins losing the ability to sleep peacefully. Nights become long debates of opinions, conversations they had repeat over and over, moments when they felt completely safe, and moments when fear made them withdraw. They begin questioning their own narrative. They can no longer blame the other's intensity, circumstances, or inappropriate timing. They're left alone with their own emotional cowardice, and this is devastating for pride. Pride that previously functioned as armor now feels like a cage. This person wants to approach. They feel physical impulse to pick up the phone or seek an encounter. But precisely in this moment of internal exhaustion begins a quiet but unstoppable change. when the ego breaks because it can no longer bear the burden of its own contradictions. Something more real, more honest rises from beneath it, the need for peace, not for victory, not for control, but for peace in the heart. The longing they tried to suppress for so long gains strength and transforms into clarity that can no longer be bypassed. They realize that no one else, no distraction or escape, can fill the emptiness that is precisely the type of connection they fled from. And this realization, however painful, is the beginning of opening up again. And then, almost imperceptibly, energy begins to change. Thoughts soften. The heart becomes less defensive. Not because fear has vanished, but because realization has matured that the real danger isn't in the proximity of the beloved, but in the attempt to live without them. In this quiet surrender is born the first genuine impulse to return, not from guilt, not from loneliness, but from deep knowledge that what you fled from is precisely what you need to become whole again. And it's precisely at this point, on the border between fear and courage, the moment prepares when the heart finally does what the soul decided long ago. If you trust this process, write the word trust in the comments.